like to begin this morning by asking a personal question. I don't expect you to answer out loud, but I would like to confront you with a thought. Is there something about yourself you would like to change? Is there some area in your life that you would like to improve? You know, when I ask that question, I realize it's really a rhetorical question. I don't suppose any of us would probably answer, no, I'm just fine the way I am. I think you, and we might say that jokingly, but I think all of us probably are willing to say, well, I could lose some more weight, or I'd like to read a new book, or I would like to be able to buy a different house, or maybe buy a new wardrobe, or maybe meet someone different. I mean, there's probably something, a number of things, in fact, about your life you're not totally satisfied with and you would like to improve, and that's perfectly normal. In fact, it's healthy. We need to look at ourselves, be honest with ourselves, and think of ways to improve ourselves. There's a related question, and it has to do with this very congregation. If I were to ask you, some elderships have been bold enough to do this. We've not done it yet. Probably a good idea. In my opinion, we don't ever do it, but there have been surveys handed out, open-ended surveys to the congregation. What are some areas you would like to see us change and improve on, and some areas you think we're lacking in? You'd be surprised at some of the answers that can be given to such a survey. But it's something to think about, isn't it? Is there something about this congregation you wish we didn't do? Or maybe something about this congregation we wish we did. I wish we were involved in, and you name it. Or I wish we had a different preacher. I wish he wasn't so loud. I wish he wasn't so obnoxious. I wish our song leader, would lead songs that I approve of, and so on and so forth. There's probably something, if you were to think about it, that you would like to improve. And I think oftentimes we get into a very negative state of mind, and we reason this way, and we tend to find all these faults, and we kind of get upset and frustrated in the back of our mind, saying it's never going to change, never going to get any better. And so we just kind of throw our hands up and just walk away. Sometimes we just give up altogether and not even bother anymore. That's very tragic. But just like yourself, there's ways you can improve yourself, always striving for greater excellence. The same is true for any congregation. We can always strive for excellence. As we think about that this morning, I want to share with you some simple rules while we go through this mental process today that I believe should be helpful to us. And when I say today, I think it would be good for all members of this congregation to routinely look at, examine where we are, what we're doing or not doing, and think of ways that we could improve what, in fact, we are doing. But while we go through this process, I want to share with you some simple rules. The first rule is probably the most obvious, but it's worth stating. Before you start examining this congregation, remind yourself there's not a church on planet Earth that is absolutely 100% perfect. Now you say, well, now speak for yourself, because our church is perfect. Well, I'm glad when people feel that way about their home congregation. I'm just perfectly happy here, and I don't see anything we ought to change, anything we ought to improve in. I don't know that that's always correct, but I'm glad to see people reasoning that way. It's kind of like yourself. You're very happy with yourself. I don't see anything I need to improve about that's fine, but I'm not sure it's always the best. We can always do better than we're doing. But there is a simple rule, and that is to remind yourself there is not a perfect flawless congregation on planet Earth. I think oftentimes we get so frustrated because we say, well, this congregation over here does this or that congregation does the other, and why can't we do what they do? And so we're always comparing what other churches are doing as opposed to what we're doing or not doing, and we try to weigh and examine ourselves in that light, and it's frustrating because we're not always on the same page, and so we think, well, if I was just over there, I would be much happier. Well, I'll simply say this. If you were over there, you would probably look over here and say, if I were over there, I would be much happier. I don't know that that's a healthy state of mind either. It's probably best to simply stay put and look around and say, what can I do to improve where I'm at? Amen. When you think about the church, all kinds of members here. Some are older, some are younger. There are hypocrites in every congregation. There are indifferent people in every congregation. There are preachers, and everyone has an opinion about preachers in all these congregations. Some say he's too loud. Some say he's too soft. Some say he preaches too long. Some say he doesn't preach long enough. And of course, when you start on the song leaders, the list is endless. And so we have all of these critiques. The 7 churches of Asia, addressed by John, of course, led by the Holy Spirit, speaking for the Lord himself, who, by the way, was moving around the 7 churches, observing and beholding their works. He noticed that in every congregation there was good and there was bad. Ephesus was praised because they were doctrinally sound. But while they were doctrinally sound, they had lost their first love. Smyrna was poor. They suffered a lot of persecution. And they were told things are only going to get worse. And some of you are going to be thrown into prison. Who wants to be a member of a congregation like that? Pergamos was located in the worst part of town. In fact, Jesus said, you live where Satan's throne is. Thyatira was known for many good works, but it allowed a false teacher, to serve in her midst and led many members into sin. Sardis, on the outside, appeared to be alive and vibrant, and everyone probably looked to Sardis and said, I want to be like Sardis. But Jesus had a very different assessment. They were strong, but no more. Philadelphia is spiritually, numerically, perhaps weak. But we're thankful to know the Lord said, I have a door of opportunity that I can open for you and no man can shut. But who wants to be a member of a little church that can't seemingly do much? Laodicea was a congregation that felt like they had arrived. They were, in fact, a congregation of people who felt totally satisfied with where they were, doing what they were doing. We don't need to improve anything. We're fine like we are. We've arrived. That seemed to be the sentiment of that congregation. The Lord said, because you're lukewarm, I'll spew you out of my mouth. Who wants to be a part of the Lord's vomit in a congregation? I don't care to be a part of that. Any church you look at is going to have problems. So rule number 1, let's stop thinking because we aren't perfect, therefore this isn't where I belong. It may, in fact, be the very place you belong. Number 2, this is one I suppose we're all guilty of to a certain extent, but we tend to, when we're looking at a congregation, look at the members, of course, of that congregation, and we tend to focus on those members who aren't as dedicated, aren't as spiritually minded, are not as sincere, and we tend to focus on them, and we get kind of sidetracked in our mind. We get negative in our thought process. And we say, I'm not sure I can stay here because I see all these people and they're just not living up to the standards I know they should live up to. I want to say this about that. You will find whatever it is you're looking for. And if you're looking for members who are hypocritical and insincere, who aren't living up to the standards you know they should live up, you're probably going to find them. But on the other hand, if you're looking for the members of the church that are seeking and striving for excellence, who are seeking to be simply Christians and to bring glory to God, to live a sincere life before God, you're probably going to find them as well. I like what Paul said in Titus 1:15, to the pure all things are pure, but to those who are defiled and unbelieving, nothing is pure. We need to be careful about the mindset. We need to remember as well, those of us who are more seasoned, have been around and seen more years, we have to be careful what we think of the little ones and our young people. They can be more than an aggravation. They can be dangerous. Sometimes when we're leaving the building or coming into the building, one of these little ones will come running by us and practically knock us down. You may be tempted, not that I ever would, but you might be tempted to think, why can't these parents beat that kid like I would if it were my kid? Or like I want to do right now? I mean, I would never think that, but I'm assuming someone might. Or some of the younger members of the church saying, why can't these older folks just get out of the way? You know, the Lord taught us, whatever you would that men should do to you, do you even so to them. If you're older, don't despise the younger. Paul told Timothy, let no one despise your youth. In Matthew 18:10, Jesus himself said, take heed and do not despise one of these little ones. For I say to you that in heaven their angels always see their Father who is in heaven. In 1 Peter 5:5, Peter said, likewise, you younger people, submit yourselves to your elders. Yes, all of you be submissive to one another and be clothed with humility, for God resists the proud but gives grace to the humble. You know, there's a role for all of us. We all need, or all needed rather, the older, the younger, those that are not so old, those that are not so young. We're all needed. We are all necessary members of this body. Let's not despise each other because of our particular circumstance in life that cannot be helped because of when we were born. These are things we have to remember as rules while we observe the congregation. When you're tempted to criticize others, be sure you check your attitude. Tom Brady was accused a few years ago having the football deflated so he would have an advantage in the Super Bowl. I don't know if he did or didn't, but I know one thing, he's kind of an old dude to be playing the NFL. But he's an excellent quarterback. No one can argue with that. Inflated, deflated, anything in between, the man is obviously capable of serving as a great quarterback. But you know, Monday morning, we look at Tom Brady and we say, well, if I were Tom Brady, and we start filling in that blank, this is what I would do, this is what I think, and we all Monday morning quarterback. We do that to each other all the time. If I were the preacher, I'd do that as a preacher. I'd be honest with you. When I hear a preacher preaching, I think he's making a point. Why didn't he say this? Well, why did he leave that out? Well, why did he say that? I mean, why didn't he shut up when he's ahead of himself? I mean, I'm always trying to critique what's being said. Not that has any reflection on you, your first day of class. I won't be doing that to you, Brother Weaver. But other, visiting preachers will come, and I'll be, kind of listening to them and thinking, well, why did you? It's easy, isn't it, to see what you think should be improved on others' part, but what about ourselves? Matthew 7, Jesus said, judge not that you be not judged, for with what judgment you judge, you will be judged, and with what measure you use, it will be measured back to you. Why do you look at the speck in your brother's eye, but don't consider the plank in your own eye? How can you say to your brother, let me remove the speck from your eye, and look, a plank is in your own eye? Hypocrite! First remove the plank from your own eye, then you will see clearly to remove the speck out of your brother's eye. I like what David was saying in the 51st Psalm. It's kind of a reflection of what Jesus is saying here. In that penitential psalm, David is asking the Lord to be merciful to him, to forgive him. Restore to me the joy of your salvation. Uphold me by your generous spirit. Then then I will teach transgressors your ways, and sinners shall be converted to you. When is that, David? When you've restored to me the joy of your salvation, when I've acknowledged, repented of, turned from my sin, when I've made things right, when I've removed that speck from my eye, then I'm able to clearly see that, or that beam from my eye, I'm able to clearly see that speck in yours. And so, really, when we think about criticizing others, we need to think in terms of ourselves first. While I'm pointing fingers at you, or a finger at you, I'm pointing several back at myself. I like what Stephen said in Acts 7 as they were stoning him to death. Lord, do not lay this sin to their charge. Now, I've often struggled with how the first century church grew and was such a powerful force in their world. Can you imagine if all of us had that disposition? I mean, they were violently killing the man in the process of murdering him brutally. And his thought was, don't lay this to their charge. Who thinks that way? Well, the answer is a faithful child of God thinks that way. 1 Peter 3:9, finally, all of you be of one mind, having compassion for one another. Love as brothers, be tenderhearted, be courteous, not rendering evil for evil, reviling for reviling, but on the contrary, blessing, knowing that you were called to this, that you may inherit a blessing. Anyone ever wronged you? Anyone ever treated you badly, or felt like you were betrayed by someone? Well, how do you respond to that? Bless those who curse you. As you walk about in this congregation and you do this that I've challenged you to do today, you're going to find work that is neglected. A lot of things that need attention. What should you do if you see a work that's being neglected? I like Nehemiah as an example of what should be done. Nehemiah realized that the walls and the city of Jerusalem was not yet complete. He came up with a plan. He formulated a plan, and in Nehemiah 3:1, he started executing that plan. Everybody had a job to do, and the wall was built phenomenally fast. Surprised everyone. They were able to pull this feat off because everyone was pulling their weight. Everyone was working together because Nehemiah saw a problem. He said, here's something that's lacking, and so here's what I'm going to do as an offer a solution to fix this problem. Now, on the other hand, in the same book, we read of a man by the name of Sanballat. Now, what did Sanballat do? He sat on the sidelines and criticized what was being done, made fun of their efforts, poked fun at them. That's kind of easy to do. Rather than sit on the sidelines and poke fun at what others are trying to do and accomplish, why don't we, if we see something lacking, get up and say, what can I do to help? And lift a hand to do what's needed rather than complain simply about what's not getting done. What are you doing presently to help this congregation? Here's something we must never, ever, ever, ever do. And yet, we tend to do it more than we even want to acknowledge. If I do find fault in myself, if I am lacking in some area, if I'm not the evangelist I need to be, if I'm not reaching enough lost souls, or if I'm not whatever, you fill in that blank however you fill it out. If I'm not whatever, it's because the way the brethren have treated me. Tired of it. Had enough of it. And so if I'm not performing, if I'm not doing my part, it's not my fault. That's really what we're saying. Is if I'm not performing as God would have me to perform, it's because I was not treated properly. You remember when God approached our parents in the Garden of Eden? Adam actually had the nerve to say to God, the woman that you gave me, of bold when you think about it. It's your fault, God. You shouldn't have brought this woman to me. If you'd have left well enough alone, we'd have been fine. But this woman you brought me, she gave to me and I did eat. And he turned to the woman. The serpent beguiled me, deceived me. I didn't know any better. Who was responsible for what happened in the Garden of Eden? Apparently, Adam and Eve thought it was God or Satan, but it can't be us. When Moses had gone to Mount Sinai to receive the Ten Commandments written with the very finger of God, before he could come back from the mountain, his own brother had taken the gold and melted it and fashioned a golden calf. The people were dancing about it. When Moses saw this, he confronted his brother, and all Aaron could say was, "You know the people. It's not my fault." When Samuel confronted Saul about the bleating of the sheep, the lowing of the oxen, and King Agag, "Why have you not utterly destroyed them as God clearly commanded?" Well, you know, the people have saved the best of these things to offer sacrifice. It's not my fault. I may be the king, but it's not my fault. They did it. It's their fault. One thing that Scripture consistently reminds us of, that we are each and every one responsible for our own actions. Amen. I can't blame the church I'm a member of. Well, the church isn't doing what's supposed to. Well, maybe it's because you're not doing what you're supposed to do. You ever thought about it that way? Maybe if you're seeing something and you're thinking, I wish that we were doing, well, start doing it and see how many join in with you. Here's something that would be helpful. Make a conscious effort to look for good qualities in your brothers and sisters. And when you find it, tell them. Amen. This point is directed at me. I'll be honest with you. I see a lot of good points in people, and I never take the time to go to the next step of expressing it. I see it. I might even thank the good Lord in my prayer for it, but I don't take the time to tell that person. Can you imagine the atmosphere that would improve exponentially if all of us were encouragers to each other? I see something good in you, I'm going to point it out. I mean, it could be something as simple as, "I'm so glad you're not wearing a Georgia Tech paraphernalia today. That's just wonderful. What a grand thing this is." We could find something good to say to each other and about each other. The proverb writer said, "Anxiety in the heart of man causes depression, but a good word makes it glad." Proverbs 12:25. A man has joy by the answer of his mouth, and a word spoken in due season, how good it is. Proverbs 15:23. Proverbs 16:24, pleasant words are actually healthy. Pleasant words are like a honeycomb, sweetness to the soul and health to the bones. If you want to see a healthy, vibrant congregation, start by pointing out the good traits and qualities you see in others. I receive a lot of encouragement from you all, and I thank you for that from the bottom of my heart. And I want to make a conscious effort to do the same for you, to tell you when I see some good quality in you. I see this in you, and I respect and appreciate you for this. Please continue being the good person. What's wrong with us doing more of that? Perhaps we should all work harder to increase our circle of friends. You can do that by simply being friendly. Proverbs 18:24, to have friends you must show yourself friendly. There's a passage that comes to mind, though, when I think about being entertaining, having people in my house, or going to see them, or going out to eat with them, or just getting to know them better and showing love and hospitality. I think of what Peter said in 1 Peter 4:8, above all these things, have fervent love for one another, for love will cover a multitude of sins. That's interesting, isn't it? The closer I am to you, and the more connected I am to you, the more I love you, the less inclined I am to notice all these petty little things about you that others may criticize. I won't see it, and if I do see it, I'm going to probably defend you, because I may be the one offering you an excuse as to, well, we understand you didn't do so-and-so, but we understand why, because I love you, and I'm encouraging you because that's what love does. And so it's interesting, isn't it, that Peter said, above all, love each other fervently. Be hospitable to one another without grumbling. Interesting, isn't it? You ever had anybody over your home? You're sharing a meal with them, and what do you wind up doing after you got into? You roasted the brethren. And so we get together and we grumble about the elder, we grumble about the deacon, we grumble about everything. Well, if we're going to be hospitable, let's be hospitable in a positive way. And that's, I believe, what Peter's saying. Let's make it a good, wholesome activity, not an opportunity to get together and start picking apart all the things you think are wrong and start thinking about all the things that are right. As each one has received a gift, minister it to one another as good stewards of the manifold grace of God. God has blessed you. Use those blessings. Every congregation has problems. Every congregation has weaknesses. Every congregation has areas that they could certainly improve in. We need to all, I suppose, ask ourselves, am I part of the problem or am I part of the solution? James said in James 4, to him that knows to do good and does not do it, to him it is sin. Let's resolve to make this congregation the best it can possibly be by putting our best foot forward. Of course, every improvement of that kind starts with looking at myself first, improving my relationship with God first, and then with others second. Maybe that there are some present who need to make things right with the Lord by obeying the gospel today, believing that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of the living God, repenting of sin, confessing your faith in Christ, and being buried in the grave of baptism for the remission of sins, rising to walk in newness of life. If this is your need and we can assist you, please don't hesitate to make it known right now while together we stand and as we sing. What can wash away